Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Crisp.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jo Ballard.
Very warm welcome to the University of Law's SQE webinar. So if we proceed to the first slide, to set out briefly what we're going to cover this evening. Obviously, the first question we're going to answer for you is, what is the SQE? We'll look at the timeline for its implementation. When's it going to come in? We'll then have a little comparison between the current route to practice, which is the legal practice course route, and compare that with the new regime, the SQE route. And then a question that many students have asked us is, should I do it? If I have a choice, should I do the SQE or should I stick with the LPC? We'll have a look at costs and the likely costs of the new programme, and then an opportunity at the end for you to ask any questions that you have. But do remember that throughout the webinar, please do type in your questions, because our colleague Jill Howe-Williams will be answering them as we go through the webinar. So, Jo.
Yeah, shall I pick up with the first thorny question?
What is the SQE?
Okay. What is the SQE, Peter? Right. Well, the SQE is, frankly, it's a new assessment regime that the Solicitors Regulation Authority are introducing for students who want to actually go on and qualify as a solicitor. And it's actually in two parts, which we're going to look at in a little bit more detail later on. But the two parts of the assessment, and they are known as SQE1 and SQE2. SQE1 is really the knowledge part, SQE2 is the skills part.
So, does this mean, Jo, that it's the end of the legal practice course?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? I would say it's going to be a slow death, in a sense. Not imminently, is the honest answer. If you look at what the SRA are proposing, they're proposing, understandably, actually, for students who are obviously studying at the moment, but also those coming on to study, quite a long transition period. They're talking about, and again, we'll look at it in more detail, but they're talking about a 10-year transition window, potentially, whereby the SQE will be running alongside the legal practice course, which of course does give more choice for students, but in some ways makes the decision making more of a challenge. And we're hoping to give you a little bit of a route through that decision making process.
So the LPC will be with us for some time to come.
It will be for some time.
But of course, the SQE is not just a set of assessments, it's also a new route to qualification, a new process as well. Yes. So we need to have a little look at that.
We'll look at spend a little bit of time to actually look at that. So we thought the first thing we would actually do is look at timelines with you. So Peter, do you want to start on the timelines?
Yeah. So
let's have a look at
the crucial date is September next year, September 2021, and that is the implementation date for SQE. And what that means, as far as the SRA is concerned, that if you start a law degree from September 2021, or you start a law conversion programme, such as the graduate diploma in law, from that date, then you have to do the SQE. So that's sort of like the cut-off point at which you must do it. So from the beginning of September 2021, anybody starting an LLB, an undergraduate law degree, or starting a graduate diploma in law, a law conversion programme, at that point, you will be forced to do the SQE. Putting it the other way is that anybody who's currently doing a law degree, currently doing an LLB, for example, or doing a graduate diploma in law, they could choose to continue on the existing route. So let's say you're in your second year doing the LLB or third year, you can continue on the current route, you do the legal practice course, you do a training contract, you qualify as a solicitor. You could, however, choose to switch to the SQE if you do so. And we'll come back to the question of whether you should switch or not towards the end of the webinar. So just to recap, 1st of September 2021 is the implementation date. Anybody who starts a law degree or a GDL from that date will have to follow the new regime that the SRA are introducing.
And that's quite important, actually, for anybody who might be, depending where you are in either in your education or your study at the moment, if you're thinking of taking a year out or something, that is actually quite an important consideration. So it's September 2021 that's the really important point, as Peter said there, to have as the cut-off point.
You'll see, as Jo said, our timeline goes way into 2032. that is the sort of the final sort of death throes of the LPC. The transition period will be the shaded area 22, 23, 24, 25, when the numbers of students doing the LPC diminishes as people move or are forced to move onto the new regime of the Solicitors Qualifying Exam, the SQE. So that's our timeline. Our next slide, Joe, is a bit complicated, so we'll spend a bit of time just talking this through this one. This slide is a sort of a single summary of the SRA's proposal on the SQE. And we say proposal because not everything is decided yet. And we'll see in a moment or two when we look at some of the detail of stage 1 and stage 2, is that the detail has not necessarily been finalised yet. And the SRA is still deciding exactly what will be in 1 and what will be in 2. But this is a broad overview of what it's going to look like. I mean, I think the first point I would start off by saying is that the SRA is no longer going to define what a qualifying law degree is. A qualifying law degree, the LLB, will still exist, will still go on, but the SRA is no longer going to regulate that. Likewise, of course, they're no longer going to regulate conversion courses. So the graduate diploma in law will no longer be regulated. So that's a big change, isn't it?
It's a very big change, and it's a significant change. I mean, certainly, I think a lot of universities, and particularly anyone who's studying on a law degree at the moment, the qualifying law degree has always been sort of a symbol. It's a recognisable symbol for students who are actually studying, and all that actually will be swept away. And as Peter said, the same is true for non-law graduates who are used to looking at conversion courses and thinking about doing conversion programmes. Again, all the rules, the regulations, all around that, simply disappear.
But just because the SRA no longer regulates it doesn't mean that students will stop doing law degrees.
No.
And universities, such as the University of Law, will continue to offer an LLB. We will continue to offer a graduate diploma in law. It is that the programmes are no longer regulated by the SRA. And you're not required to study a law degree or to study a GDL. The only requirement the SRA do have is you must be a graduate by the time you are admitted. So it is still a graduate entry profession, but they're not specifying what that degree is in, what that degree looks like, what you've studied, and so on. So that's a big change that's been introduced. Of course, what you do have to do is pass SQE 1 and pass SQE 2. So shall we look at some of the detail on that now?
Let's look at some of that detail. So as you can see from the slide in front of you, I mentioned before that SQE was actually in 2 parts. So SQE 1, or stage 1 as it's referred to there, is essentially what students traditionally study on the LLB and the conversion course currently. So key, sometimes referred to as foundation, areas of law, but in addition to that, they're studying them in particular practice areas. So for example, on that list under SQE 1, you've got dispute resolution being taught in the context of contract and tort.
So that's litigation.
It's litigation, isn't it, essentially, court proceedings. And criminal law is obviously taught in the context of criminal procedure and practice.
So land law is taught in the context of property law.
Absolutely.
And so on. Or assessed in the context of property law. So
really broad areas, actually, very wide areas. And the main point to mention on this at the moment is the method of assessment. The method of assessment may be unfamiliar to a lot of students studying law, in the sense that these broad areas are going to be assessed. Current proposal is 2 multiple choice assessments, and each of those assessments, the current proposal is they will have 180 questions each. Now, we have also acknowledged at the bottom there that there is reference as well to 2 skills assessments, and if you look at the top of the list, there's reference to legal writing and research. The SRA is still uncertain on this one, aren't they, Peter? Whether to assess it at this particular stage.
They did a pilot on SQE 1 in which over 300 students took part, and legal research and writing was part of the pilot, but the SRA have said that they have not yet definitely decided whether any skills assessment will be part of SQE 1. I think what we can say definitively at this stage is that the subject areas set out there will be assessed in SQE 1, and they will be assessed through the medium of multiple choice questions. Some students may never have done those before, or done them in a very limited context.
Absolutely.
So this is a very dramatic change to the way students are assessed in these areas. So stage 1, multiple choice questions in those areas. Two very large papers, 180 questions.
Substantial papers, aren't they?
Per
Yes.
page, yeah.
And then notice, moving on to SQE2, you must have passed all of those, those two, currently proposed SQE1 assessments before you can actually attempt the SQE2 assessment.
So that's the only sort of rule, really, isn't it? You have to have passed one before you can move on to 2. Yeah.
And then look at the nature of 2. Now, I'll come back to it, a little bit up in the air at the moment, but as I mentioned before, this is very much the skills stage. So you have got reference there to 5 skills areas, 2 of which are oral skills, so interviewing a client, or alternatively doing a piece of advocacy or oral persuasion, persuading a client, persuading your senior partner of your particular views. And then the remaining 3 sets of skills assessments there will be written skills assessments. So there's a combination, 2 oral and 3 written.
So we've got drafting, we've got research, case and matter analysis.
Absolutely. And of course, we are assuming, or we imagine, legal research and legal writing may come into this stage 2 in due course. But also notice it refers to practice context there. And the SRA haven't made a definite decision on this yet, but the intention is that those currently 5 skills will potentially be assessed in 2 context areas, or they could be assessed in all 5. They haven't made their minds up on that. And again, the SRA are consulting stakeholders on that.
So we think at the moment stage 2 is going to be a pretty big set of assessments. A minimum of 10, could be up to 14, maybe more. The pilot finished, I think, last month.
It did, before Christmas.
Before Christmas. And we're going to know the results of the pilot of SQE2. I think about 130, 140 students sat the pilot, and we'll have the results of that sometime in the summer. So SQE stage 2, minimum of something like 10 assessments in at least 2 practice contexts. So just to recap, you have to be a graduate. You could be a graduate in law, but it could be in any other subject. You have to get through SQE1 stage 2 and SQE stage 1 and 2. The SRA, interestingly, are not prescribing any course. So you can prepare for SQE1 and indeed SQE2 in any way that you want. So if you wanted to buy a load of books and just sit in your bedroom reading them, self-study, then the SRA doesn't mind. It's entirely up to you how you decide to prepare for those. We, of course, anticipate that most students will want to buy a preparation programme that prepares them to get through SQE1 and SQE2. What's interesting is about when you sit these.
Yes, it is.
I mean, the SRA have said, haven't they, Joe, that they expect you'll do SQE1 before you start the training contract, which they're now renaming, by the way. Sorry for all the changes of names, but the training contract's now going to be called Qualifying Work Experience. That's the last box on the right-hand side, QWE, Qualifying Work Experience, the current training contract. And they anticipate that most students will do SQE1 before they start the training contract. But interestingly, their other assumption is that SQE2 is sat during the training contract. So during the qualifying work experience. In fact, a lot of the law firms that we have been speaking to actually want students to have done.
They want to have some skills.
To have done SQE2 actually before they start the training contract. So I think we'll see a mixed pattern emerging. I expect most people will have done SQE1 before they start the qualifying work experience, and then a mixture where some people do SQE2 before they start, rather than doing it during the qualifying work experience.
The one thing this does do, though, is actually give a little bit of flexibility for students. So certainly, as Peter says there, they'll do SQE1. They could go straight into qualifying work experience. I think the critical thing there will be whether the firms expect them to have some skills training before they actually go into the qualifying work experience. Obviously, we'll talk about the difference between the legal practice course in a moment and SQE, but if you've only done SQE1 and legal research and writing disappear into SQE2, you've not really done any skills training.
No. one partner in a law firm said to me, that they didn't want a trainee turning up in day one of the training contract with less knowledge and fewer skills than they have now, because obviously those skills are absolutely crucial to practice as a solicitor, particularly the written skills, legal research, legal writing and drafting, absolutely the bedrock of what a solicitor does.
And particularly trainees cut their teeth on that, don't they, when they go into that qualifying work experience or what is currently the training contract. So it's a little bit strange not to have had any skills training before you walk in the door. Yeah.
So what I thought we'd do now is contrast the SRA's proposal on the SQE with the current route and see how it compares with the new regime. So
moving on, shall I start on this one, Peter? I mean, effectively, the current route to qualification has less choice and is very clear. So essentially, somebody will have come through and probably studied a qualifying law degree that we were talking about before and will have come out with an LLB. Alternatively, students who haven't studied for law, so have done geography or history, they are the ones that will be looking at the conversion law programmes and obviously a GDL, effectively a graduate diploma in law programme. Now, once they've completed either the GDL or an LLB, very straightforward, they go on to the legal practice course, don't they? Which at the moment, the vast majority of students are studying over an academic year, maybe slightly shorter period than that, but it is a programme of study. And then once they actually move on from the legal practice course, having successfully completed that, and go into the training contract, the 2-year training contract, then obviously they're picking up additional skills at that stage, Peter, aren't they? Through the professional, what's known as the professional skills course.
So it's a very clear route at the moment, is it?
Very
you do an LLB,
route,
you do a GDL, you then do the legal practice course, full-time or part-time. You then start your training contract, during which you do your professional skills course. 2 years later, you're admitted and put on the roll as a solicitor by the Law Society.
Absolutely. Yeah. So very clear, isn't it? Whereas if we move on to actually look at the new route to qualification, as Peter identified earlier, you need to be a graduate, but not until the point of admission. So the sequencing is slightly different, or potentially.
Yeah. But I suspect that most people have done their degree before they start SQE1. It's interesting, though, that the SRA are not saying that you have to have done the degree. As long as by the time you admitted you're a graduate, that's enough for the SRA.
So you could be studying your degree and trying to do SQE1 actually effectively at the same time, which would be a real challenge.
Yeah. But I think we anticipate that most students will do their degree first, graduate,
the traditional route,
and then start preparing for SQE1 and then SQE2 and the qualifying work experience. Yes. The only rule that we have to be clear about is that you can't sit SQE2 until you've passed SQE1.
Yes.
Apart from that, it's actually a very flexible approach.
It is more flexible. And remember what we said before, you do not have to attend a programme of study to sit either SQE1 or SQE2, but we very much anticipate that because of the breadth of what is being covered, and SQE1 is very wide, and also potentially the skills, if it
14 assessments.
I was just going to say if they're going to be in all those practice areas, equally is going to be very wide. We do anticipate students will need a period of study to actually focus on those areas and get them up to speed.
The eagle-eyed amongst you on this webinar may have spotted that there are some gaps on the list of subjects covered in SQE1. And I thought we might just sort of turn to those now, because the obvious missing gap, Jo, is the elective content.
Absolutely. I mentioned before, most students undertake a period of study for the LPC, which is normally a period of 9 months. Let's just take it as a standard academic year. And what that year it comprises is obviously the key areas required by the SRA. So they'll do business law and practice, do property law, they'll do litigation, criminal and civil. But then students get the choice as to what we term as electives or option areas that they choose for the second part of the course. And those are normally subjects that they opt to do either because they're interested in practicing in those areas, or perhaps they're going to a specific firm.
Which requires them to do certain electives.
Absolutely. But the point is they are acquiring more technical knowledge that will be of benefit to them when they actually get into the firm environment.
Because we offer something like 15 electives
We
in
do.
family law, in personal injury, clinical negligence, in corporate finance, private acquisitions, immigration law, insurance, and so on. None of which is covered in SQE 1 or indeed in SQE 2. So you would go into the training contract with substantially less knowledge in those areas than you do now. And for many law firms, it's crucial that their trainees arrive on day one with that substantive knowledge, because a firm will have a particular practice focus, it will have specialisms, and it expects its trainees to arrive with that knowledge.
With that level of knowledge.
And of course, that's completely missing from the SQE proposal. So I think that's the first big gap, isn't it?
It is a big gap. I mean, it gives us opportunity to fill that gap with areas that are relevant to practice from talking to the law firms. But it is, Peter alluded to the fact earlier, talking to the firms, they want students who are better, have better levels of knowledge, better skill sets when they actually walk in the door, not less.
And I think that's a very important point, Jo, is that the SQE is a minimum standard.
Absolutely.
And it's the minimum standard that is being set by the regulator, the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority. That does not mean that just complying with the minimum standard means you'll get a job in a top law firm, or indeed the firm of your choice, whether that's a high street firm or a specialist niche practice firm, and so on. So satisfying the minimum requirement of just passing SQE 1, passing SQE 2 will not be enough for many law firms, who will require you to have done additional areas of study, because those additional areas of study are crucial to the practice of the law firm. So I think the missing electives is an important point.
I think it is, and I think it's also important for students actually, because sometimes they explore those areas actually as part of the electives and actually take a view.
Indeed.
I do want to go down that route, or actually I prefer this route. As you say, there's a wide range of electives to choose from, and it helps students with their career choice as well.
I mean, I think the second gap as well that we need to highlight, of course, is, as Jo said, when talking about SQE 1, is that the skills gap in SQE 1 is that at the moment it's only legal writing and drafting.
Absolutely.
And the SRA, legal writing and research, the SRA may choose to remove skills altogether. So if skills are completely removed from SQE 1, that would mean that if you started the training contract, the qualifying work experience, only having passed SQE 1, you would have done no skills whatsoever. And that, from I think the vast majority of law firms, is a huge gap. Having a trainee arrive on day one who's never done any legal writing, no research, no drafting, never done any oral advocacy or persuasion, communication skills, I think is a big gap as well. And of course, in our LPC programs, we put a lot of additional skills in, office-ready skills, financial business skills, and they're also missing.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've tried all the time and are actually enhancing the skills elements, because again, that's the feedback from the firms. So we've also, as it mentions on the slide there, we've also introduced more legal technology into our programs, and we've done it in a pervasive way. So very much where an area of technology is relevant from the point of view of a particular practice area or an elective, then we've given students the opportunity, we can't replicate what every firm does, but we've given those students the opportunity to actually have a go at that piece of technology, whether it's preparing documents or it's researching particular areas or carrying out due diligence, for example, in mergers and acquisitions. We've done a lot of work in actually integrating that. So when students go into practice at the moment, having studied on the LPC, they're very much more rounded individuals. It's not just the technical knowledge, they've actually got at least an understanding of the types of skill they're going to need to exercise when they get into the office environment. So
let's have a look how we're going to plug these gaps, the electives gap, the skills gap, and the office ready skills and the legal tech that is not in SQE at all.
Well, what we are aiming to do is we do see this very much as an opportunity to actually look at our programmes, and we will be offering master's level awards that will effectively be divided, if you like, into 3 areas. So the absolutely critical part is the first part of the student journey is to make sure that students succeed in SQE1 and their SQE2 assessments. As we've already mentioned, SQE1 is likely to be new in the sense of students sitting significant multiple choice assessments, unlikely probably to have done that actually through their undergraduate studies. And obviously for SQE2, then again, that we're very experienced with in respect of skills because we do it now, and in fact on both, for both SQE1 and SQE2, we have very much our experience of preparing students for the bar. So students currently going to the bar do actually sit a similar type of assessment. So this is not new to us. We have got a lot of experience in those areas. The second element of the course is what we've termed as key practice areas. This again gives students the opportunity to actually select areas of practice that are of interest to them. And we anticipate this is sort of substantive technical content, areas of law that students are interested in. So we anticipate they will be looking at 3 areas there that they want to focus in as part of their career, whether it's going into commercial practice, it's going into corporate practice, or as you mentioned, personal injury, immigration.
So this is plugging the elective gap,
isn't
it?
It's plugging the elective gap,
yeah.
Very much so.
Because many big city law firms will expect you to have studied private acquisitions and corporate finance, and they wouldn't entertain you as a trainee unless you studied those subjects. So obviously the minimum requirement is yes, SQE and SQE2, but those electives still remain very important to many law firms.
Yes. And the last element of the course, again, it's a master's framework, so in that last element of the course is to give students opportunity to select further content that can be, either if they want more technical content, they could do that, but we see this as a fantastic opportunity, to be honest, to actually develop some of the skills and behaviours that the firms are feeding back to us on. So very much areas we've suggested there, such as legal project management, law and business, looking at how a law firm operates as a business. So students aren't just going in there as legal advisors, they've got to make money as well. So it's how that firm environment actually works. And of course to enhance what we're doing on legal technology already, so to take that a stage further.
So our programmes will prepare students for SQE1 and SQE2 success. They will plug the elective gap and also prepare students to be office ready, the skills and behaviours that they need to succeed.
In the current environment, really. No, absolutely.
So how are we going to deliver these programmes, Jo?
Well, we've always given students a lot of choice as to how they actually want to study with us. We do anticipate that choice continuing and being enhanced. So our programmes will be delivered on a face-to-face basis for students who are wanting to come and have an attendance environment in the university. But equally, in addition to that, we will be delivering our programmes online. The important point is the embedding of the learner analytics into the design of our programmes to actually ensure that SQE1 success.
Would it be helpful if I just explain a little bit of detail what we mean by learner analytics? I mean, as we've repeatedly said, most students will not have experienced the volume of multiple choice questions that they will be facing in SQE1. At the moment, the current proposal is 2 super exams of 180 multiple choice questions. Yeah. And that's a very big change to the way that most students will have been used to being assessed. Most students will have used to be writing essays, solving problems, but writing prose, possibly doing some multiple choice questions, but a limited number. This is a very big change. And obviously it's essential that we have a way of guaranteeing student success on SQE1 answering those multiple choice questions. And learner analytics will enable us to do that. What it will mean is that the students every day, if they wish, will receive through a mobile app that we have developed, practice questions, practice multiple choice questions. It's a very smart way of learning because the app realizes the areas that you are strong on, the areas you are weak on, and the areas you need more support on. This will feed into a dashboard which will indicate the interventions that are necessary either by a tutor or by the student themselves to get where they need to for exam success. And it will compare your performance with that of your peers, and you'll be able to see the progress that you're making towards SQE1 exam success. And I think that's a very crucial element for passing SQE1.
And it's very personalised learning as well. So if you're weak on a particular topic, you'll get more questions on that.
The mobile app's intelligent enough.
It's intelligent enough
to work out that you need more on contract law, Joe.
Absolutely.
Was it landlord?
It's probably landlord actually, but no, that's right. Whereas you can just move on with your contract law if you're comfortable with that. So it will enable students to adapt their learning and personalise it in that way. And we see that as a particularly important part of the design process.
Other key point, of course, is that we are designing our programme as a master's degree.
Absolutely.
And therefore will be eligible for graduate loan funding, which I think is really important in terms of the finance of the programme.
And the other final aspect really of that master's programme is that as part of the masters, students will have access to our employability services, etc., to actually support them in seeking a training contract if they come to us without one already.
So the LPC versus the SQE, which should you choose? I mean, I said as part of the agenda at the beginning that we would look at costs. Unfortunately, I don't really have any detailed answers on this other than sort of ballpark figures, because obviously there are two costs that a student will have to face. The first cost is the actual assessment fee. The SQE 1 and 2, there's a fee for sitting those assessments. The SRA have not yet said definitively how much it will cost to sit SQE1 and SQE2, but that it could be up to £4,500 for both assessments. So we don't at this stage know the precise figure. It might be 3,000, it could be 4, could be 4.5.
I mean, the only thing I think we do know, and I think this is why the SRA are going backwards and forwards a little bit on the skills side of things, is that understandably they are anticipating SQE1 assessment will be cheaper than the SQE2 assessment, because inevitably assessing skills is a more complex area to actually deal with and to ensure, sort of standards from a pass rate point of view are achieved fairly. So that will be a more expensive process. SQE1 will be cheaper, but we don't have any more real clarity on that.
I mean, worst case scenario, every student will have to find £4,500 as the assessment fee to sit SQE1 and SQE2. I think what I would say about that is that we should have greater clarity towards the end of the year.
Yes, we should do.
But the other point I'd also make is that obviously that's one sitting of SQE1 and SQE2. Obviously, were you unfortunate enough to fail one of those elements, you'd have to pay the fee again. Yes, so that's a new element.
Yes, it is.
All current LPC courses include assessment as part of the course fee.
It's absorbed.
It's part of the fee. This is different. You pay the SRA a fee for sitting SQE1 and SQE2, say up to £4,500. Separately, of course, there's then the cost of doing an SQE preparation programme. We're anticipating that most students will choose to do a preparation programme, whether it's the master's degree that we're offering or just doing our SQE1 preparation programme. Putting the two together, it's likely that the cost of doing SQE1 and 2 and the preparation programme, including the additional content, will not be a great deal less than the legal practice course, depending upon which elements you choose.
Absolutely.
Were you to choose just to do SQE1 and SQE2, then it would be substantially cheaper. But if you choose additional content, then obviously that's an additional fee as well. So I'm sorry to be a bit vague on costs, but our own reality is that it's not going to be substantially cheaper than doing the current legal practice course because of the costs of the SQE fees.
No, I agree.
I suppose the other point we'd make next is that it's a very different approach to the assessment.
Yes, I think, and I do think that's something for people to think about, what if they have got a choice, depending on where they are from a study point of view. As Peter's alluded to, the assessment regime for legal practice course is probably what most students would regard as more traditional. most of the legal practice course subjects are assessed through way of an examination, perhaps coupled with multiple choice. There are, of course, the oral skills and the written skills assessments as well, so there may be a degree of similarity between SQE and LPC on that. But the sort of more substantive questions, you know, the current LPC providers are not assessing those by pure multiple choice questions.
That's a very big change.
And so it's a big change, and it's actually quite interesting. Some students, you know, I know from the extent that to which we use multiple choice, some students find them relatively straightforward, some people find them very challenging. So do look at those different methods of assessment in deciding which is appropriate really for you.
The next question is, if you choose to do the SQE, what should you do? Because your decision you'll have to make is, well, you definitely have to do SQE1 and SQE2.
Absolutely.
But do you study any additional content? Do you study any additional skills? And if so, what course should you choose?
Yes.
So that's, you know, at the moment, the LPC, you've got no choice other than where to study the legal practice course.
Absolutely.
You have to do the course, it's compulsory, the structure is set and regulated by the SRA, you follow what the SRA have set out. With SQE, you have much greater flexibility, but you also have to much greater use of your own judgment about what is necessary in order to get the job that you want, in the type of practice area that you want, in the type of firm that you want, in the location that you want. And those are more complicated, I think, decisions.
They are more complicated decisions, and I think everybody's got to look at the providers and be sure that the quality and the standard is there, because certainly there will be a lot of new providers that come into the marketplace, and just be sure that you're going for something that suits you and has the support you need to be confident of success.
Yeah. So the LPC route is tried and tested, it's trusted by law firms.
Yes.
Joe and I spend a lot of time visiting, speaking, listening to law firms. What do law firms want? Well, I would repeat what I said at the beginning, really, which is that they don't want trainees turning up on day one in the office with less knowledge and fewer skills now. So a lot of certainly larger law firms are expecting students to have sat and passed SQE1, and at the very least to have sat SQE2. They may not yet have the results of those assessments, but to have got those skills under their belt before they arrive in the office, and have done some additional study in key practice areas that are relevant to the law firm.
Yes.
So many law firms will expect students to have done SQE1, SQE2, and some additional study in relevant areas to that law firm.
Absolutely.
If I were to put you on the spot now, Joe, and say you've got a choice, SQE or legal practice course, which would you choose?
I think, in all honesty, because of the areas that remain still very uncertain in relation to SQE and also cost, I would very much go down the route of actually studying for a master's with the funding and do the legal practice course. I know what I'm getting, I know it's a tried and tested route, and I know it's respected by the profession. So that would be my choice.
Super. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
So shall we see if we've got any questions that have come in, if we can work this device. So
let's go to that one to get them down the side.
There we go.
There we go. Got it.
So lots of questions coming in.
We've got lots, haven't we?
We have indeed. How many subjects can we choose? So, sorry, that's just disappeared again. Sorry.
How many subjects? That's probably in relation to, in addition to SQE1 and SQE2, isn't it? When I was talking about the master's programme, the intention is that essentially, if you looked at an overall master's programme and you did SQE1 and SQE2, that would take up 50% of your master's programme, and therefore you would have choices to the other 50%. I think that's probably the easiest way of actually explaining it. So we're trying to give students as much flexibility as we actually can from that point of view. So I would say 50% is probably the best way to express it at this stage.
What is the maximum time you can leave between doing SQE1 and SQE2? That's an interesting question. Well, the minimum is that you'd have to have done SQE2 by the time you admitted. Yes. So you could, in theory, leave quite a long period of time between doing SQE1 and doing SQE2. Yeah. So the SRA requirement is that before you are admitted, before you qualify as a solicitor, you have successfully sat and passed SQE2. So, for example, you could do SQE1. The first sitting of that will be in
November 21.
November 21.
Yes.
You could then do have a year out. You could then do a 2 years qualifying work experience. So in 2024, you then sit SQE2. That would be no problem as far as the SRA was concerned. I suppose the question I would come back to is that actually a sensible way of doing it? Again, many firms would want you to have those skills before you start.
But I think, again, it shows the flexibility, because arguably some students may hope that if they've done SQE1, done some qualifying work experience, that actually the firms might sponsor them at that stage, the SQE2, which, remember, I said was the most expensive part of the assessment. But yes, Peter's right. You could, in theory, take a year out in the middle of it all.
It's an interesting question. Can you do the conversion course? Can you do the GDL while also preparing for SQE1? And we have an answer to that, of course, which is we're offering a programme.
We're offering a programme, but I didn't talk specifically about that. But one of the things we're actually doing for the non-law students is actually offering a programme that is essentially a conversion course with SQE1 included within it. Because again, that would be a master's programme and would be eligible for funding. And it is potentially, I think, I've always thought that was one of the things the SRA, the type of programme the SRA were quite interested in providers actually putting together, because potentially, depending on timelines, it could be a quicker route through to qualification again. It would be a challenge. I won't say it won't be a challenge, but it's certainly feasible to do it.
So we're offering a suite of graduate diploma in law programmes, one of which will include SQE1 preparation as well. So I think that answers that question.
Okay.
Can the law firms fund any of these programmes like they do for the GDL, etc.? Yes, in terms of funding, all the law firms we have been speaking to are intending to continue their funding for the new programmes. That's right. And that's in two respects. They still intend to recruit non-law graduates, so people who've studied history or maths or philosophy. They still intend to recruit non-law graduates, and they still want them to go through some type of graduate diploma in law programme. They will continue to fund their future trainees through SQE1 and SQE2 and the additional content. So yes, funding will still be available from law firms. So there's no change there. What will change, of course, is what the law firms require you to do, because as Joe was saying earlier, this is a huge opportunity, in fact, to do things much more flexibly. SQ1 and SQ2 are the minimum requirements. The additional content is up to the law firm to dictate what they would like to do. Can we give a quick recap of the different new courses? Okay, very, very simply, there will be GDL programmes.
Yes, I mean, I think the simplest way I would express it is that for the non-law graduates, again, feedback very much from the profession is that they love having non-law graduates in. They bring a different approach, different set of skills. So we will retain conversion programmes, but what we will add to that conversion programme is the opportunity for students to do it if they wish to do effectively a conversion programme which has SQE1 included within it. So that will be one programme in its own right. Alternatively, for the law graduates, we will be offering a master's programme, as shown on that earlier slide, that essentially comprises at its core what Peter and I refer to frequently as the regulatory minimum. So that's SQE1 and SQE2. It will secondly have within it the elective replacement elective content, and finally there will be opportunity for students to select areas that could either be skills based or behaviours based. If a student wants to do another elective, absolutely fine, but we just wanted to broaden it so it wasn't always technical content that we were offering, that we were giving students opportunity to do skills as well.
One student asked a very specific question about which campuses our programmes will be offered at. The plan is to offer them at all of our campuses, so they'll be offered all around the country, including at Exeter, which is what Laura has asked us.
Oh, right, okay. Yes, so, we will continue that in exactly the same way as we do now.
Is the new GDL conversion course eligible for student finance?
Yes, because we're going to wrap it up into a Masters Award. We currently, again, if anybody's looked at our portfolio currently, we have a graduate diploma in law course, but we do also have an MA law course. And of course, it is the MA, it's always the Masters course that is eligible for funding. And we will be continuing with that in exactly the same way, as I say, plus this additional course, which has the SQE one included within it. So, yes.
I think we're nearly at the end of the webinar. I'll just scroll down and see if any final questions have come through. Please, even when we finish the webinar, please do continue to send your questions through, because there'll be somebody online to pick those up as well.
Absolutely.
The slides will be available as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for your time this evening.
And I hope we've answered some of your questions that you've got about SQE. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks very much.